While our courageous men and women are serving our country in the United States Armed Forces at different parts of the world, I often wonder, how can I serve one of them? Years back, I had the opportunity. There was a frontline battle soldier who had fought in combat and was given a 2-week leave of absence so that he can come back to California and visit his family and loved ones before he re-engages into more warfare. My client met some of his good loved ones at a restaurant, and he had 2 beers, just 2 beers. He responsibly drank, and then he responsibly drove home to visit more family and loved ones. However, what happened to my client next is a tragedy, because his vehicle hit a pedestrian who died at scene, and then my client was arrested for manslaughter. And here's the rest of the story. As you can see behind me is a memorial site still on the side of the roadway where the victim was deceased. Nobody should ever undermine the terrible tragedy that this person suffered being hit by my client's car. But as I was conducting this investigation, the questions remained: did my client kill him? Did my client commit murder? Did my client commit manslaughter? Or could the victim have killed himself? As I unraveled this investigation between a cutting-edge attorney, an average PI like myself, and a great accident construction expert, we were able to come up with that conclusion. No doubt it's a tragedy that the family had experienced the death of their son. And no doubt they were angry with this investigation. But some people just don't want to admit that their child may have committed suicide. I often wondered what would have happened to my client had he not hired a defense team that was willing to work with due diligence. You see, after striking the pedestrian, he was honest. He stopped to render aid to the person until he realized he was deceased, and then he called the authorities. When the authorities arrived, they asked him, "Had you had anything to drink?" And my client was honest. He says, "Yes, I had 2 beers," and that's all he had. But what's interesting, because we had a person that was deceased and my client admitting having 2 beers, and one other witness about 2 miles down on a secondary street said that he thought my client might have been going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit on the primary street, thus changing the threshold. Even in California, to be legally DUI, your blood alcohol content must come back to a .08. My client was arrested. His blood later came back as a .06. But because we had another witness down the street, almost 2 miles away, at 2 in the morning when it was pitch black, that thought they were going 10 miles an hour, my client was going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, this changed the threshold for the legal limit of DUI. Therefore, he was arrested for manslaughter. The primary problem with this traffic agency's investigation is that there really was none. They didn't think outside of the box. They just took the word of one witness that was 2 miles away that stated they believed my client was traveling 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. But once I got the case, I went back to the scene of the crime, the alleged crime, and I handed out wanted flyers into the community, basically looking for anybody that might know anything about this accident, that might have witnessed it would be great, or anything about the decedent. And sure enough, I got some phone calls. You're about to hear from one lady that became a very important witness in this case. She was also driving on the same dark road going home at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was unrelated to my client, but she happened to be driving in front of his vehicle when she saw a dark shadow that she didn't even really know it was a human being until she saw the face right by the window, and she had to steer her wheel in order to avoid a collision with this pedestrian.
Well, everybody, this is where the night took place. It looks very bright actually right now, but at 2 o'clock in the morning it was very dark with little of these street lights actually on. As I was driving down this street, I noticed a black silhouette crossing in the midway. He was wearing black hood, black sweatshirt, black hat, black everything. I actually felt it was like out of a monster movie. He was actually a human being. When I got closer, I swerved my car, I almost hit him, and he actually walked towards my car, appearing to actually wanting to get hit. I did not stop for the man. I just went home because I was very frightened. But I looked in my rearview mirror and I actually noticed that the car behind me had stopped to help the man. Little did I know that man was actually hit and killed. A few weeks later, I noticed a private investigator's flyer stating that if anybody had any information on the accident to please call and come forward. I actually called in that day and told him my story, that it appeared that he intentionally was trying to commit suicide.
A couple more weeks later into this investigation, I learned that there were some homeless people living in these bushes and trees very near to the traffic collision. So I went in there, and sure enough, I found some people living in cardboard boxes and mattresses. I found one witness that was very interesting. He had told me that the decedent had recently become distraught over some type of problem with family or friends, and he became very suicidal. He told me a lot about the information, but he also led me to another witness that knew more. The next witness I went to lived in a home nearby, and he had told me that the decedent was very despondent and very suicidal, and that the decedent threatened to kill himself, and he even told him the methods of suicide. He told him he was going to wear all black and walk in the middle of the roadway in the middle of the night and intentionally get struck by a car. What's interesting is I then pulled out the coroner's reports and realized that the decedent at the time of this collision was wearing a black cap, a black sweatshirt long sleeve, black pants, black socks, and black shoes. Very consistent with the methods of suicide that he had told my second key witness. Fast forwarding through this case, my client obviously had a constitutional right to let a jury decide his fate. However, the district attorney later did offer a plea bargain of misdemeanor manslaughter. My client was busy fighting this war, and he didn't want to stay around for that, so he accepted a misdemeanor manslaughter, and now he's fighting for freedom and our Constitution. Albert Pine said, "What we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others is and remains immortal."
Mother, Mother Ocean, I have heard you call. Wanted to set upon your waters, I was 3 feet tall. You've seen it all. You've seen it all. What's the matter with you? I switch from sail to steam, and in your belly you hold the treasure few I've ever seen. Most of them dream, most of them dream.